Warlocks are looking at some pretty significant changes coming in Phase 3, and there is a lot of information to cover, so let's get to it. Up first, the rumor mill is currently going nuts over these two datamine changes to some key Warlock skills. Currently, the changes are focused on the rune Lake of Fire, changing the rune to require Rain of Fire to be fully channeled for 8 seconds before the fire damage buff kicks in, but to compensate, the buff has been raised to 50% from 40%. This is a pretty significant hit to both tank and DPS fire damage, basically only allowing you to precast it before the fight starts. This will make Demonic Embrace the only useful destruction chest rune if this change does end up going live. The other change that was data mined is the inability to cast Soul Link while in Metamorphosis form. Again, if this change is true and it goes live, this will be a significant nerf to not only tank, but PvP Warlock Metamorphosis Demonology builds, since Demonology was our best talent tree to improve our survivability. We won't know for certain until the phase goes live, but these two changes have been confirmed in the new build by various discords doing their own independent data mining. Next is a pretty significant yet quickly explained change to leveling. The current 100% experience buff will stay from levels 1 to 39, but from levels 40 to 49 we'll be getting a 50% experience buff. This is going live the day Phase 3 launches, so you'll instantly get the bonus experience starting day 1. This is also supplemented with a new PvE cooperative event called Nightmare Incursions that can be accessed from as early as level 25. Currently, there isn't much information about how these Nightmare Incursions will work, besides that they will be a viable alternative to leveling up and have a reputation to farm for taking on corrupted entities, for various rewards including an entry-level PvP set for level 50. They are also planning on Nomergon raids being a sizable amount of experience for players 40 and above on the way to max level at level 50. Warlocks have 6 new runes available to them in this phase, 3 wrist and 3 helmet runes. The wrist runes are Immolation Aura, Unstable Affliction, and Summon Felguard. Unstable Affliction is a welcome addition to the Affliction rotation, possibly making it more competitive, even if Fire Destruction should still be better overall. Even if the Lake of Fire rune nerf is true, simply because of these new destruction-focused helmet rune. Our helmet rune options are Backdraft, Pandemic, and Vengeance. Backdraft is the big standout this phase, making Fire Destruction have basically infinite 30% spell haste. But Pandemic is really good for Affliction and for PvP, comboing really well to Demonic Embrace. Lastly, Vengeance is the new tank-based rune, giving us the equivalent of the Warrior's Last Stand skill, plus permanent slow fall while you're in your Metamorphosis form. This is probably the best Warlocks have had rune-wise, with many class-defining abilities available to us with all of these banger runes that will all play well with a variety of builds that you can come up with. Honestly, you can't really go wrong choosing any of these, though obviously some of these runes will work better with certain builds more than others. Our next section will be about the updated PvP items. Listed are the stats for the entry-level PvP set that you can obtain from the Nightmare Incursion reputation and the rank 5 to 7 Bloodguard and Knight Lieutenant's Dreadweave sets. For the Bloodguard and Knight Lieutenant's Dreadweave, everything is the same stat-wise except for the look of the gear, because one is for the Horde and one is for the Alliance. In our opinion, most of these pieces aren't worth using over other items you may have already have on the road to 50, or that you may get on the road to 50. The other big update to PvP gear is via the Stranglethorn Veil PvP event. They'll be introducing a new currency that you use to purchase the new level 50 items, and for Warlocks we have a choice of 2 rings, Loop of the Burning Blood and Eye of the Blood Moon. The only difference between the two stat-wise is just fire damage versus shadow damage. Also, you may want to try and farm up the level 40 honor tokens from the STV event before the Phase 3 releases, since they will be removing the original level 40 honor token that you can purchase for the old level 40 event currency, and instead releasing a new token for the updated level 50 event currency. According to the promotional video they released, all the other rewards will stay besides the original level 40 honor token, and you can downgrade your new level 50 currency to level 40 currency if you need to purchase the old items. Continuing the new items, we also have the new Dark Moon Fair trinkets that will become available to grind out starting in Phase 3. The 3 options are Decay, Sandstorm, and Torment, though I don't think any of these trinkets will be absolutely mandatory for any phase of Warlocks, like some classes have had to do in the history of the game. Professions are also getting some nice updates, including a reusable flask for alchemy for Nightmare Incursion content, granting 30 spell power for 1 hour, Sigil of Living Dreams, a consumable for enchanters, granting 30 spell power for 30 minutes, Engineering also gets Fear Ward bracers that are the equivalent in stats with the epic War Song Gulch bracers, while also protecting its potentially some new Nightmare Incursion mechanics. Finally, Tailoring gets 2 new epic shoulder patterns depending on if you are a DPS or tank. They also have the added bonus of increasing your damage and survivability while doing the new Nightmare Incursion content. Speaking of the Nightmare Incursion's reputation, there are a variety of reputation gear options beyond the PvP set that you can grind out. There's a strong staff called Nightmare Focus Staff, which has a lot of stamina, intellect, and spell power on it, and a direct upgrade to the BFD staff that you can get. You can also get a strong ring called Roar of the Dream that can proc an additional 66 spell power for 10 seconds, and an interesting chest piece called Marathra's Inheritance that can put targets level 50 or lower to sleep when they hit you on proc. Finally, for the new Datamined reputation items, a spell power trinket was not listed, but we are pretty sure there will be one considering there's a healing and melee AP one. This will be a reputation you'll want to focus on as soon as possible on your road to 50, so you can hopefully have as much of this new stuff unlocked and ready for you when you do finally max at 50 for the phase. The new Sunken Temple raid will go on a standard week lockout, resetting Tuesday after the server resets. It will also drop more items per boss than raids before it to make up for being a week lockout, but has quite a few powerful items that you can attempt to grind out. Starting off with the weapons, there is a powerful epic staff called Spire of Hakari Warship that gives some nice crit chance, spell damage, stamina, and intellect that all the locked DPSs, whether they're Affliction or Destruction, should go for. Blizzard has also finally seen the light and split the new one-handed daggers between a DPS dagger and a tank dagger. The DPS dagger is Hubris the Bandit Brander, offering 20 spell damage, stamina, and intellect, while the tank dagger in theory is Modus Karkun, which gives 100 armor, stamina, and 23 fire damage. Rounding out the new raid weapons, the new wand is Nightmare Trophy, giving spell damage and intellect, and much like the one-handed weapons, the new armor sets are also split a bit better between tank and DPS, with tanks wanting to shoot for the Nightmare Prophet set and DPS wanting the Malevolent Prophet set. There are also a variety of armor off pieces that you can get to cover a bunch of different slots, like garments of the Atalai Prophet, Atalai Hexer's Gloves, Gem Burst Circlet, Hakari Shroud, Visage of the Exiled, Kilt of the Fallen Atalai Prophet, and Court of the Untamed. And many of these items with hit on them will also be super useful going into Molten Core next phase with how much hit you should need to be able to hit the bosses at level 60. Finishing off the Sunken Temple loot, there are some new rings, amulets, trinkets, and a cloak to try and grind out. For rings, we have the Drakeclaw Band of the Barbringer and Drakeclaw Band of the Juggernaut, good for DPS and tanks respectively. Amulets are very similar, with tanks probably wanting Resilience of the Exiled and DPS wanting Jindo's Lost Locket, but it wouldn't be out of place for those to switch them. Sunken Temple introduces a catch-all cloak for this phase though, Haku's Hex Cape that honestly you'll find something as good or better outside the raid. Finally, for trinkets, Breath of the Beast isn't a bad choice because resists kill your DPS and spell hit is a stat that is hard to come by for warlocks, especially destruction warlocks. Chained Essence would be a fun toy for tanks to use for AoE pulls, though shouldn't be something that you should be relying on. Zalar Galar is a affliction specific trinket, boasting your next non-channeled dot by 100 spell damage and will be very useful for affliction warlocks. And lastly, the epic trinkets are like mini Zandalarian hero charms. Atalai Blood Ritual Badge is good for tanks, and Atalai Blood Ritual Charm is good for both tanks and DPS. One final note, Blizzard has said they have updated the dungeon drops for the dungeons relevant to the 40 and 50 grind. However, we didn't find any data mines that would have those changes available for us to comment on them, so we don't know how well they did with them. Our final section of this Phase 3 preview is the new raid world buff and consumables that you can get from the new raid Sunken Temple. Atalai Mojo of Forbidden Magic is a raid consumable that only works in Sunken Temple, but increases your spell power by 40 and gives you a chance to proc a Shadow Bolt on successful spell hit. Fervor of the Temple Explorer is the new level 50 world buff, and it gives 5% crit, 65 spell power, and increases all stats by 8%. Lastly, Sunken Temple also provides new shoulder enchants you can grind out, with warlocks wanting to grind out the Atalai Signet of Mojo, increasing your spell power by 9. Our absolute final piece of information is that warlocks will be receiving a new pet this phase called the Explorer Imp. There's currently very little information available to explain what it does or what it's for, including if you need it for a rune that's being released in Phase 3. With all that information out of the way though, we have a lot of changes coming to the Warlock class, making it a good time to be a Warlock player even if the proposed nerfs to Soul Link and Link of Fire go live. If you enjoyed our coverage of the upcoming content, why not throw us a sub and like? Feel we might have missed something? Let us know down in the comments. Thanks and have a good night.